Forgiveness is for you, not them. Is it? On one hand, forgiveness is something that we do because we submit to God. We understand that He forgives us daily, and we forgive so that we don't hold on to things. But is there another step? Why do we stop here? As we represent Christ, His grace, and mercy, forgiveness actually is for the other person too. Today, we're talking about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the pride that prevents us from doing both. Another episode of the podcast starts now. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the New Mercies I See podcast, where we honor God in the daily living. I'm your host, Rochelle Soyola, and I am so happy to have you. If you're new, hey, I hope that you've been able to catch up on a couple episodes. Make yourself at home. I got some tea for you. Every podcast, the type of drink is gonna change. I think last week it was water. This week is tea. So let's see what we come up with next week. And if you're a seasoned listener, I want to just say thank you so much for giving me another listen. So let's get into the things. Hey y'all, I hope that you guys have been well. I hope that your weekend and last week was a good one. So if you're listening to this is the first time that I'm recording a podcast now that the podcast is live. It's official. We done put it on the socials. We done started capturing the content and releasing stuff and dropping stuff. And the feedback has been amazing. Y'all be holding me down, like especially on the gram. I love y'all so much. It's like y'all get me. We're building a community slowly but surely, and every time I need to regroup and come back, y'all just like, girl, it ain't nothing, I was thinking about you. And so I'm so thankful for that. So yes, the podcast is now live. Feel free to follow us on New Mercies I See Pod on IG, and also on my regular page, Rochelle Soyola. So yeah, I'm really happy about that. What else did I do this weekend? Or this week? So I keep telling you guys about these girls that I am like assisting and leading, and we have like, because I'm vice president, we have like a cabinet, like an executive board. And so the executive board, we all decided the president wanted us to do like a Western themed shoot to kind of like announce us, and so we did that. And ciao. Yeehaw! It was a really fun time. Our photographer was amazing, and we took some great photos. Maybe on the video I can like put some on the screen. I don't know. We'll see what my editing hands can do once we get to that part of the pod. But yes, that was so fun. But besides that, it was pretty chill, and I was pretty exhausted nonetheless. So that's what I did. I hope your weekend was a good one, though. Feel free to tell me how it was on the socials. All right, housekeeping, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, share this. This is how the podcast grows. And this is also how good people hear good things. So feel free to bless someone today by sharing this podcast, whether that's via video or audio or whatever makes your heart flutter. Okay. All right. So I'm sure you see the title by now. Today we're talking about forgiveness. And y'all, if I can be honest, this is the area, one of the areas, but I feel like it's the biggest area where sometimes I feel disappointed in God the most. Remember, I said this is gonna be an authentic podcast. This is not a podcast where we're acting like we ain't never mad at God, right? You know, sometimes we wrestle with God about things because we don't necessarily understand life and like the way that it is and why it is that the way it is, right? And, you know, I'm sure that you guys can pretty much pick up on my personality by now. I'm fun, but I am clear, you know? Like, I would like to consider myself a direct person. I've learned to put grace in there, but for the most part, I like to address things head on, right? I'm not afraid of the hard stuff, right? I like to be crystal, right? But here's the thing. Y'all may like that on a podcast, right? But in real life, clear conversations, especially when someone has done me wrong, 9 times out of 10 results in distance and loneliness for me. Distance from the other person because it's been revealed that they're not perfect, and loneliness for me because whatever we had going on, the friendship, relationship, whatever, usually changes or ends. And that's just a real deal, Holyfield, right? Everyone loves a straight shooter when you're listening to a podcast or reading a self-help book and you're trying to get your life in order, right? But not when it's a friend saying, this is how you hurt me. Right? And I'm not perfect, right? I'm sure there's nuance in there. As I've grown, I've learned to work on my delivery, but I love humans and I love how they interact authentically meaning sometimes with disagreements. And I love seeing how we relate to one another and how we walk alongside each other, do life together. I feel like I say that all the time, but that's the one part of my life where of humanness and the study of them that I feel like I'm able to understand but not conquer. That's one of the areas in my life that really can frustrate me as it pertains to just the people God has given us to love. How does that sound, right? So today I'm going to be talking to you about forgiveness, and I want to be the first to let you know I'm sometimes upset at God for wiring me this way as it pertains to my communication, or me always needing to be the peacemaker. And, it seems like sometimes He's always placing people in my life that have strengths but struggle in the area of accountability. So I'm saying this as a preface to just say that hear me when I say certain things in this podcast and see that I'm coming from a place of, girl, I see you, I love you, and I'm with you. We're in this together. So in our lives, we have different opportunities where we have to forgive. For me, I can think of just from the top, forgiving your parents. That's been hard for me as I've grown. I come from a Jamaican background where and my husband similar, comes from a Nigerian background where your parents apologizing to them, it seems like an insult to their seniority. So it's rare that you get it. Or if you get it, it's for the minor things I'm sorry I stubbed your toe. But you don't get a big, hey, you're hurting and I dropped the ball here as a parent and I'm sorry for that. You don't get any of those. And so a lot of times when you don't receive those apologies, bitterness can build up in your heart, and it's hard to forgive, right? In marriage, marriage is great because on one hand, the pro of marriage is that, usually it happens where when you're weak, your partner is strong. And so when you're down and out, your partner is usually there to kind of pick you up and pull you back up and get you back to where you need to be. But the con of that is because a lot of times we have different strengths or even just grow at different paces, whether that's just, life and through being sanctified by God, that lays the foundation for hard conversations that can be difficult when you're trying to communicate something to your spouse that God may not have revealed to them yet. They may not have learned that lesson yet. And so, it's like, it can be like my child, he's like, she only 4. She doesn't know how to necessarily do things the right way all the way. She's not an adult. It's her first time on earth. So, sometimes she resists when really, as a parent, I'm wiser and right. And so sometimes, marriage can kind of be like that too. Forgiving friends, great times are good, right? But why did you do that? Right? Sometimes we can feel that way when it comes to our friends. Why did you treat me this way? And when I brought it to your attention, why did you deflect and shut down? Right? Why does our friendship have to end because you chose not to be a God-honoring friend to me? Right? And so again, today I'm talking to you from a girl, I get it standpoint. But I'm also talking to you knowing that I still have to push through and do what God says that we're supposed to do. All right. So, what is forgiveness? And you already know the answer, but I want to kind of tell you what it is defined, and you're going to see how it lays the foundation to everything else we got to talk about today. So, forgiveness defined is the release of resentment or anger towards someone that has wronged you, right? But more importantly, it is the release of the desire or even the right, for revenge or retribution. And I say the right because sometimes we have a right to want justice for what it is that we've experienced, okay? But it's the release of that right or desire for revenge or retribution. And so, to start, I want to talk about some of the examples of forgiveness in the Bible. And I want to start off by saying I will not be using Jesus' crucifixion for one of my examples. And here's why. Because Jesus was without sin. And you're going to listen to this and you're going to be like, well, Jesus died for our sins and I get it. And Jesus forgave the lady and I get it. But he's Jesus. And I'm not God, Rochelle. I can already hear you saying, I'm not God, Rochelle. So I'm not going to use him. But that being said, the Bible also gives us examples of other people. There are other people in the Bible other than Jesus. And there have been other opportunities and other stories in the Bible where forgiveness has taken place. And I want you to see just how it's been done. Right? So I think of stories, and the story of Joseph comes to mind, where, his father really, really adored him, favored him even, and his brothers got jealous, and they ended up betraying him and selling him into slavery. And I think about the end of that story where Joseph forgives his brothers and invites them to come live with him in all of his glory, right? In all of his success. I think about the prodigal son and how after a time of being rebellious or disobedient, his father forgave him, right? I think about David's forgiveness to Saul, who is now known as Paul, when he was trying to take David's life. When David had a choice, he chose to save Saul's. Child, how many of y'all would save someone that's trying to kill you? You will not kill me. Why are you trying to kill me? First of all, you trying to kill me? Stay away from me, Wookie. Actually, how about you just never talk to me ever again? Because you're insane. But yes, he had the choice, and he chose to save Saul's life. Right? So, why do we forgive? Is it important? Should we value it? I always say this, these are things we need to talk about. Should we value this thing? Why do we forgive? Is it just it's for me and not for you? Y'all, let me tell you something. I hate when people say that because it just feels so self-righteous when people say that. But why do we forgive? We forgive because how dare we not? Right? We forgive because how dare we offend God daily, secondly, and be insulted when we are getting a taste of our own medicine, right? We forgive because even our hurt can be used to show the other person a peace that surpasses all understanding that only God can give. You offended me, but here's your forgiveness. And I want you to know that it could only be God that would make me act this way towards you. Even in my hurt, I'm going to show you God. Right? And so that's why we do it. Now, I'm going to say this a couple times in this podcast. Stay with me. Okay? Because you're going to be listening to some of these things and you're going to be like hating. You're going to be crunching up your face. You're going to be like, well, what? Stay with me. Right? All right. So what does forgiveness look like, y'all? Forgiveness looks like communication, right? In Matthew 18:15-20, God outlines what it looks like when you have strife and issue with your brother, right? It says, if you have something against your brother, go to him and tell him. If you're not able to tell him, go in front of other people with him and get witnesses and bring your evidence. If that doesn't work, let the whole church know and discuss it. And if that doesn't work, consider him a Gentile. Right? So forgiveness looks like communication. Some of y'all, and when I say y'all, I mean me. Some of y'all are offended by something and someone, and they don't even know. Right? You've just cut them off. And you think you're right because technically you're justified because they wronged you. But you're also wrong because you have a part to play based on what God told you to do, and it hasn't been done. So if somebody has offended you and you haven't even communicated how you feel, you have work to do. It's not just, oh, I cut you off and I don't talk to you anymore. There's something you need to do. So if you haven't done that, go do that. Right? Forgiveness also looks like joy. And I wanted to make sure that I put that in my notes today because there's such a negative connotation with forgiveness or with conflict or with disagreements. And with the right conviction, the right time, the right person, the right God-led life and situation, forgiveness looks like joy. I can think of so many times when my husband and I, we are like not happy with one another. I have something to say and so does he. And we're saying it. Not only do we have something to say, but we're saying it, right? And I think about how sometimes we will say our piece, and at the end of that conversation, he's like, I receive it. And I'm like, I receive it, and I get where you're coming from, and I love you, and we're cracking up laughing. Sometimes we'll be mid-argument cracking up laughing. Like, joy. Sometimes we feel like if I enter a disagreement with this person or a situation with this person that isn't the best or less than perfect, that I'm in a bad place. And sometimes you're in the right place for God to move. So forgiveness also looks like joy. And as you are navigating your relationships, your friendships in life, I want you to remember that so that you are confident when conflict arises and confident to handle it in a Christ-like way. Forgiveness will make you look like a fool. Sometimes forgiveness means you being utterly disrespected. And I'm saying that as someone who feels like that has happened to me over and over and over. You come to a person, an issue has arisen, you come to the person and you're trying to address it head on so that you can move forward in love, and that person deflects, or they just stop talking to you, or or they're not teachable and they just like have all this pushback to you, and they start treating you unlovingly, maybe because you're dealing with a non-believer and they don't necessarily submit to the same God you do, so they don't really care about treating you with care. Or you're dealing with another Christian and maybe the way that they deal with things is, nice, nasty, passive aggressive. A lot of Christians struggle with feeling like they've done something wrong. It's weird. The whole point of Christianity is understanding that we are sinners and fallen short and we need a savior. But those very same people feel like once they accept Christ, they also become perfect. So if you tell them that they're not and that they've hurt you, they also, like, instead of humbly coming to you like a Christ following believer, they too can get nasty in the way that they treat you. And so, yes, sometimes forgiveness looks like you looking like a fool. You've put yourself out there, you've apologized, or you've like asked how you can make this right, or you've told them, hey, I love you, but you've offended me, and they go ghost on you. And you feel horrible because you've been vulnerable, you put yourself out there, and they responded in an immature way, either by disrespect or even lack of a response. Immature, right? And we struggle with this. We struggle with this part of forgiveness, the part where it makes us look like a fool. Because we are more focused on looking like a fool than we are on looking like a servant. You don't want to look like a fool, so you don't want to forgive that person, but right now you're not looking like a servant that God has placed in that person's life to show them who he is. Again, a part of this podcast is just saying we have work to do, even when we are offended, even when someone offends us, even when we are justified in never speaking to them again. We have work to do, right? When Peter asks Christ, how often should I forgive? Jesus said 70 times 7. And that's not a literal number. That is an example of infinity, of over and over and over and over and over. And so as we're in our relationships, we need to be mindful of that. So now, let's talk about reconciliation. Because we love to forgive. Y'all love to forgive, child, but y'all hate to reconcile. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I already told you that you was going to be hating. We're going to talk about it. And this is where the content creators be feeding y'all ego. Okay? You can forgive, but not reconcile. It says who? Who said that? Who said that? Right? Why are we taking the easy route? Why are we taking the worldly route? Now, let's take it. Let's dial it on back. Let's do a little rewind to the stories that we talked about earlier. Joseph, the prodigal son. In those stories, the offenders were dead wrong. This isn't a situation where it's like, oh, it's a gray area. You know, sometimes you're in conflict with someone and it's like, you did a little mess, I did a little mess. How can we both apologize and move forward? Not in these situations. In these situations, Joseph was just being himself. His father was loved on him and was favorable. And because of his brother's jealousy, they betrayed him and sold him into slavery. Joseph did nothing wrong. So he's justified in never speaking to his brothers again. Slavery? You done sold me into slavery? Okay. But what does Joseph do? Does he just say, I forgive you, brothers. Now go along your way. I don't want to ever talk to you again. No. He says, I forgive you. And you know what? While we weren't in each other's lives, I became really successful and I want you to join me. That's reconciliation. Right? When the prodigal son, the father was a loving father. The son was clearly being disobedient and rebellious. And after he was done in the world and wanted to come back home, his father didn't just say, it's okay that you did all these things. I forgive you. Let me know how life goes. He looked at his son and he said, welcome home. His son got to still reap the benefits of being his son. He wasn't disowned. He wasn't forgiven, but disowned. Some of you are forgiving people, but disowning them at the same time. And that's where I feel we missed the mark. Right? In Matthew, God says, before you even come to me with a gift, lay that gift down and go reconcile with your brother. And it seems as if we forget that part, right? We forget the part where God not only calls us to forgive, but to be reconciled with one another. So many times we have so many issues, and the issues don't even be that deep. Your feelings just got hurt, and there is a difference. And everybody has different thresholds, and I want to make space for that. But a lot of times we are just using the crutch of knowing, well, as long as I forgive you, I can just shut the door on you. And to me, it feels like the same stubbornness. You know, when I read stories in scripture, I feel like God always calls us to take it a step further than the world, right? God said, everybody knows that adultery is a sin. But if you even lust after a woman, you haven't even slept with her yet, but the fact that you're lusting after her is a sin. We know that murder is horrible. We know that that's a sin. But if you're even thinking of your brother in that way, in an angrily way where you're ready to sin, you've missed the mark. And so the world says, I can forgive you and never talk to you ever again. But I think that God wants us to show others Him even in those moments. That's sacrifice, right? That's dying to self. That's laying our life and our will down for the greater good of Christ, pushing through and not just forgiving, but doing what comes after that. Even though that's hard. I get it. Somebody hurt you and it's hard. Ask me how I know. Somebody hurt you and it doesn't feel good. And you're hurt. You're crying, depending on the offense. I get it. But sometimes there are opportunities to still push through. And we need to be receptive to that. Right? Let me hold your hand when I say this. God's not impressed. God's not impressed that somebody offended you and you stopped talking to them for the rest of your life when the situation could have been reconciled. He wants you to go deeper. So think about that as you were in your relationships. Now, I told you I was going to make space for you and prepare a place for you. Relax. I know that you have been listening to this and y'all been hating. I done said it 3 times now. I know you've been hating, right? So here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you should adopt this toxic culture that we do in church where there should be no accountability, where we shouldn't address things and say you were wrong, where we shouldn't hold people to the fire and tell them what God says about offenses and challenge them to do better. And I'm not saying that you can reconcile with someone who's unrepentant, because you cannot. Right? Every attempt at reconciliation is not going to be fruitful. And sometimes relationships change based on offenses. I thought you were one way. I realize that you're no longer that way. And as a result, the wise thing to do so that I'm not exposed to your hurtful ways is for our relationship to change. But sometimes the relationship needs to be given the opportunity to be restored. Right? Allow people to experience their consequences, but make the consequences appropriate, right? God forgave David, but he still had to deal with the consequences of his sin. But my question is, how much of your lack of reconciliation is due to you trying to seek revenge because you don't believe that God's going to do it for you. You don't believe that God's going to hold that person accountable eventually. Or you don't believe that the same God that you claim convicted you and changed you can also change someone else. There's so many times when maybe an offense happened and you were young and your mind wasn't fully developed and you were thinking with too much selfishness. But as you've grown in the Lord and you've grown in your sanctification, the Lord has pruned you and you're a better person now. Is that not true for the person who's offended you? And is that person who's offended you not also made in God's image? And is God not also working on them as he's working on you? And if the journeys align with one another, is it not possible that this relationship can go back to where it used to be, if not better over time? It is possible. But if you close the door, you'll never know. And how many relationships are we just bounce into a new person, we get offended and we just go to a new friend group. We just find a new husband. We just go to a different church. Where are the stories of the people who had a rock in front of them and they moved it to the side together and kept walking hand in hand to the next way of this life's journey? Where are those stories at? I don't want to hear that you just forgave someone. Good for you. And there's a place for that, and we should be doing that. But I want to hear more stories where we reconcile with one another. And so that's the task. That's the task for this week. I want us to focus on that. Now, before I go, I want to talk about this one last part. Let's talk about when you are the one that needs to be forgiven. Because a lot of the times we talk about forgiveness in an entitled way. I have to forgive this person because of what they've done to me. And we always say this as people who are always getting offended, but never doing the offending. And that's not true, y'all. We offend, we miss the mark. And so as you're thinking about forgiveness, think about when it's you that needs to be forgiven. Think about how you have to come humbly to your friends and ask for a better way. Are you even doing that? Or are you so self-righteous that you think that you don't make any mistakes? If so, you have work to do. All right, y'all, that's the end of this podcast. I'll see you next week. The new mercy that I want you to see today is don't have to forgiveness. Take it all the way. There's a relationship out there that, not all of them, some of them deserve to be put on pause, but there's a relationship out there that can be reconciled. And that's what I want you to do today. Reach out to someone that the relationship is good enough to where if you talked it through, you guys can start the process on reconciliation. Tell me in the comments how it goes, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you, mean it. Now go be blessed. Bye.